The field of the people who work as futurists, it's actually 100 years old. H.G. Wells, the famous novelist, he was the person who first said, we should take these signals from the present and extrapolate.
Hi, Amy. Can you hear us?
I guess for me, I always knew the type of output and impact I wanted to have, and I was flexible on the way that I might get there and do that. I've always had a very clear vision of what me in the future, I've always known what that was.
Bem-vindos a mais um episódio do nosso Expresso Talks. O nosso programa, como você que já está seguindo a gente há um tempo, está disponível no YouTube, está disponível no Spotify e você também pode procurar aí por Expresso Talks BR. Uma novidade é a minha nova companheira de bancada aqui para o programa de hoje. Nós temos a Jackeline Carvalho, que ela é a editora-chefe do portal IP News. Certo, Jaque?
É isso mesmo, Samir. Muito obrigada pelo convite. É um prazer estar aqui com vocês hoje.
Muito obrigado pela tua presença aqui. Acho que vai ajudar bastante a nós entrevistarmos essa grande convidada de hoje. Eu mesmo sou um grande fã da Amy. A Amy, ela é uma escritora que fala sempre do futuro e sempre dá uma visão muito interessante do que pode acontecer, tanto do lado bom, positivo das coisas, mas também dos cuidados que nós temos que ter com as novas tecnologias. Então, como eu já deixei escapar, a nossa convidada de hoje é a Amy Webb, escritora, professora da Nova York University, também conferencista e CEO do Future Institute Today. Enfim, ela é uma assumidade em vários temas e bem-vinda, Amy Webb. Thank you very much for being here with us. It's a real pleasure to receive you here. We follow you all the time on the news. Your whole career is unbelievable. The results, all the things you say. And I would like to start talking to you because you express yourself, you describe yourself as a quantitative futurist, right? Which is something that if we think about maybe 20 years ago, that was not an option, right? We had lawyers, we had engineers, medical doctors. How do you become a quantitative futurist? How do you describe your profession?
Well, first of all, hola, boa tarde, and muito obrigada for having me on your show. I always enjoy these opportunities, so thank you so much. And I can share a strange thing with you before I answer your question, if that's okay. My father is moving. My father has moved out of his home where I grew up. And so I was helping him a couple of weeks ago clean out his house. And I found all these boxes of things from when I was a child. And in one of the boxes was some school projects, I think from 3rd grade. And there was a poster that I had made about Brazil. I remember the teacher, this is true, I posted the photo on Instagram. I remember the teacher giving us an assignment, any country we want. We would spend months researching, in 3rd grade, that country. And for some reason, I was obsessed with Brazil and Portuguese. So I made this fan poster of like I was a fangirl of Brazil. It was my love of Brazil. So I thought that's interesting to share. Anyways, so quantitative futurist, the field of strategic foresight. So people who work as futurists, it's actually 100 years old. And originally, the field started off as sort of speculative storytelling and journalism. And H.G. Wells, the famous novelist who wrote The Time Machine, among other things, he was the person who first said, we should take these signals from the present and extrapolate from them what might be the future. So that was at the late 1800s, early 1900s. In the 1940s, there were some researchers studying game theory and math and statistics that said, maybe this is a better approach. Let's try to get all the data we can and crunch the numbers and predict narrow outcomes. Mostly they were trying to do this for the United States military, to understand the possible outcomes of World War II. Along the way, these two ideas got combined. It's not enough to just tell stories. You have to have data for people to make decisions. But the data on their own usually aren't compelling enough to give people sort of an emotion to make sense about the future. So these two areas got combined. And that's what was fascinating to me. My background is in both. So I was a journalist for a while, and I studied game theory and economics. And there we have it. So that's my job.
Great. Amy, nice to talk to you. It's so grateful to be here with you. Thank you so much. And I'd like to talk to you about your career. I'd like to continue that. Has being a woman made a difference with your career?
Mm-hmm. So congratulations. I know this is the second season, and you're mostly talking to women this season, so thank you. Gosh, I work in such a strange area of strategy. There's not very many people who do this work at all. And I'm hoping to change that. Historically, the people who have done this work have been Caucasian men. And, again, I just know using statistics that when you have a bigger sample size, just more people, more data points, you wind up with just a much wider breadth of information. So one of the things that I'm trying to do now, and I have been for a while, is to bring more people into this field. I think a lot of people think I have this cool job because I'm a futurist. My hope is that pretty soon my job will not be cool. Like when I tell people I'm a futurist, it'll be like I'm telling them I'm an accountant. Nothing against accountants, but I don't think anybody's like, ooh, accountants are sexy. Listen, if you're a sexy accountant, I apologize. But the point I'm trying to make is I'm hoping that the field becomes boring enough that it's not all that unusual anymore. I really, the more people, and that's not just women and people of color, but also the global South. There's not enough people doing this work. I would love to see more people in Brazil taking up this type of work and doing it. I'm friends with some futurists already. There's some wonderful people who do this. There's a great company called White Rabbit with some people that are doing great foresight work, but I'd love to see more of it.
Tell us, how did you get involved in so many different fields that you in touch in today?
Well, my mother was a teacher, and I think I was a pretty energetic kid and not very good at sports. So I think she tried to involve me in other activities. So that was music and obviously academics. And at some point there was a club called the Future Problem Solvers. And that was when I was in 6th grade. And this club, which was a competitive club, wrote scenarios. So when I was in 11 years old, I was learning how to write scenarios, which is kind of cool. I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time. So I think, I think that unfortunately we've gotten to this point in human history where everybody's supposed to be a specialist. And, there's all this data showing that really strong generalists or people who are pretty good at several different things are just as important as, somebody who's a very well-trained specialist in just one area. So if you're somebody out there who's thinking, gosh, I'm interested in this and that and the other thing, if you're willing to spend time on all of those things, then I would say, don't listen to what everybody else is saying. You should go out and do all of those things.
How did everything start? And when you said, I will do that for life?
Yeah. It's kind of a long story. I will make it shorter. I thought that I would go to law school. Originally, I wanted to work in a part of the government called the Solicitor General's Office, which in the United States is a very special type of lawyer that argues at the Supreme Court. And I thought, this is the most powerful position. It's the best way to create the future, because that's where the sort of law, the ultimate say in laws comes from. I had a panic attack while I was taking the test to get into law school. I didn't know what was happening at that point. I had some anxiety that I didn't know about, and I had a panic attack and I blacked out. So law school was no longer possible because I didn't finish the test. I moved overseas. I moved to Japan, and I did a bunch of different jobs in Japan. I started working as a journalist because I enjoy reporting and I like writing. But I was watching the news industry basically implode. And at this point in Japan, it was, 1996, 97, 98. They had this new thing called a phone, a portable phone that had a camera in it. And this was pretty rare at this point. Really only Japan and Korea had these new type of phones. And I just remember thinking, holy smokes, like at some point, everybody's going to have a camera in their phone. And the internet, right? How does this not totally change journalism? So I was interested in thinking about strategy and what could the long-term future of journalism look like, and how could newsrooms change, and how does the business model need to change? And nobody at all was interested in hearing that from me. They were like, get back to work. And I was a complete pain in the ass. I was 28 years old, and I was full of confidence, and nobody cared. Nobody wanted that, right? I get it, right? I'm sure I was completely obnoxious. But that caused me to leave the industry because I got bored, and I was like, this is ridiculous. Why can't we do this other type of work? So that's how I kind of found Foresight. I realized that there was a field where you could actually do this. It was a form of strategy, but doing long-term strategy with more complexity and more variables. And that was, I guess my company's been around now for 18 years. I forgot, I've lost count. And there you go. So it was, necessity is the mother of invention, I guess. And that was true for me.
And that's great. But during this process, Amy, did you find any kind of a person or a mentor that helped you to live from this A point to B point, or?
I would say yes and no. I'm a planner. And I guess for me, I always knew the type of output and impact I wanted to have. And I was flexible on the way that I might get there and do that. So I've always had a very clear vision of what me in the future, the impact that I'm having on society. I've always known what that was. In terms of mentors, I think, sure. So I've been studying something. I've been basically learning through a teacher of some kind since I was 3 years old. I think one thing that is very strong in the culture that I come from is education. My parents, my mother's family immigrated and was escaping the Nazis, and wound up in the United States. And the one thing that people can never take away from you is your education, which, by the way, is one reason, again, that I think about Brazil all the time, and I especially think about the teachers in Brazil. I'm amazed at what some of these teachers, especially the ones who are working in favelas, are doing. Sometimes they're teaching at 2 different schools. Yeah. They're also social workers and substitute parents, and it's they have such a huge impact. So I've been lucky. I've had teachers my entire life who have a lot of times just taken that extra step. So I think that's a big part of it. And every time that I've landed somewhere when I worked for other people in other companies, I always found a mentor. And those people, again, took the extra time and I was curious. And along the way, I've met lots of people. And so I'm grateful because it's like every time I met one of those people that could mentor me, it's like I got, I play a lot of video games. So it's a little bit like when you get the new tool, if you're like in Zelda, like if you get a new tool that just allows you to go on to the next thing. For me, it's every time I encounter a mentor, it's like they're giving me a tool and I have to learn how to use it so that I can move on to the next thing. For that reason, we open sourced all of our methodology at Future Today Institute a couple years ago because, and we do a lot of free webinars. We've got a bunch coming up this spring. We do whatever we can to help. I like to help pay back what other people gave to me. Good. So the only real limiting factor at this point is time, which unfortunately I don't have enough of, and I can't make any more time. I wish I could.
Yeah. I think you brought a very good point about education that is essential for everybody. And and you're correct. I mean, here in Brazil, you can find different realities, right? Of course, there are richer people that can afford go to a good school where teachers are well paid, but also we have a tough condition in other side of the country, or sometimes in the other side of the street or the city, that you have students that do not have the same quality education, which is a problem for us as a country. And I will try to get that entering in the AI. You talk a lot about AI, and I've seen your videos about that, and the now called ChatGPT took the world by storm, and they reached the 1 million users. I don't know, maybe less than a week. Everybody called the attention of the power of AI. You have now this giant tech companies already fighting for this new age of search. One thing called my attention that you had tested GPT-3 at the time was called. How do you believe these tools can change the way a regular person, or let's say we're talking about education, people at schools or even at the companies, how they are going to use these tools for the good, or maybe for the bad? I don't know. It's so difficult to predict for me at this moment.
I stopped to write something. You're making me think some things that I haven't thought before, and I wanted to like write that down. I'm going to use it at South by Southwest.
I'm already glad.
Okay, hang on. Okay, I finished writing it. So there's been some pretty big announcements. Actually, it's been a couple of months now, because before ChatGPT was by the company OpenAI. Was released to the general public, it was in beta. So there were people who were playing around with it. And this is what's called a large language model. So this is a AI system that can generate text at the same level or better than a person can. The data that it's been trained on, supposedly, although we don't know because there's no transparency, only goes up to the year 2021. So you can't ask it current events or things like that. Okay. What do I think about how this impacts us in the future? I think a couple of things could happen. I've been playing around with it now for, I guess, 6 weeks or so. I've asked it to write some code, like computer code in Python. I've asked it to build some statistical models. I've asked it to write part of our trend report, which it did. And I think what's going to happen is it's going to create a new type of digital divide between, there's like the people who have the like the computer and the bandwidth and the money, because it's not free. The good version isn't free. So the people who have the ability to use it and the people who don't. So that's one divide. I think there's another divide, which is people who are really creative and they can think of all kinds of really interesting things to ask it to do. And people who are not either they're not creative or they just don't have enough experience to think about really creative prompts. I think there's another divide between the people who want to use it to enhance their productivity and people who will use it to replace the work that they should be doing. I worry that this is a little different than a calculator. A calculator helps us do basic, 1 + 1 = 3 or whatever. And if you know there's a part of me that's like, does everybody have to know how to do long division? If you have the calculators are literally everywhere. They're inside of our phones, right? So do we really have to do that in our heads anymore? I don't have an answer to that. It's something I've been thinking a lot about lately. But I think one thing that happens with this age of assistive technology is that it creates all of these new divisions that do not fall in the traditional way. It's not like mature economies versus emerging economies, rich people versus poor people, it's old people versus young people. It's not that. And I don't know if it's a good thing that we wind up with all of these new sort of divisions in society because of some of these tools. I also think, by the way, on a business level, this starts to create new divisions for businesses too, and also governments. I don't know. I think it's like divisive right now.
I'd like you to talk about your book, The Big Nine book. And in that book, you call attention about the big tech giant companies that are in control of AI. What's the way for a person that wants to know more about his or her life than any of the big nine? Is that possible?
That's a good question. Well, let me give you an example. It's Valentine's Day. That's when we are talking. I don't know when this is airing, but we're talking on February 14th. And I thought about sending my husband a, kind of a sexy picture on text messaging. Tasteful, but, and I thought to myself, I don't know if I should do that. Not because I don't trust my husband. He's not going to share that picture with anybody. Yeah. But between my phone and his phone, how many different companies were used to hand that picture off? And what data was transferred along with that image? Because in a way, the image itself is information, but all the rest of it is information too. And I think that's the part of this that's really challenging for people, which is there's the information we can see, and then there's all of the metadata, the meta information that's largely invisible. And at this point, I don't know that we can truly divorce ourselves from those big nine companies. I think it's too late,
You call them a G Mafia, right? In your book.
Yeah.
And actually, they are so powerful, and you don't see how can I have a divorce from them. My future is anyway to be attached to these companies, no matter what. Is there any way to be free at this moment?
I think it would be really hard. Even with my daughter, so when she was born, we created like a digital trust for her. So we registered her name. So we claimed her name, her email address, her URL on all the different services, right? We've always done that. But other than that, we've never uploaded any photos about her. We don't post anything about her. So she's pretty much invisible. But even though she's, we've worked as hard as we can to help her stay anonymous for as long as she wants to be. But at some point, and I don't know. She sends Gmails. You know what I mean? So she's.
Yeah.
I don't know at this point that anybody can truly disconnect. I don't think it's possible.
We are
because
attached.
one other thing, I was going to say, even if you choose never to be online and never to connect, chances are pretty good that, you've walked by a camera somewhere in Sao Paulo or something, or somebody who's got, somehow you have been recorded at this point, no matter how hard you try.
And Amy, how about metaverse? You're talking about your daughter. You're 3 years old. I'm thinking I'd like you to introduce about metaverse in our conversation. You said last year that metaverse is describing it is an umbrella term, saying that metaverse will encompass other technologies like Web3, blockchain, NFT, and any others. Is that possible to have these tools working together, metaverse and reality?
My views on the metaverse are pretty strong. I find it very, very disappointing that we've spent more than $1 billion on the idea of the metaverse, and we have not spent the same amount of money on the future of agriculture, right? If you go back in time a year and a half ago, October 2021, right? Nobody knew very few people were talking about the metaverse. And listen, I think Neil Stephenson has got interesting ideas. It was he who wrote the book where that concept occurred. It's a challenging book to read in English, and I'm a native English speaker. Before Facebook changed its name to Meta, there were very few people actually talking about the metaverse. Because a publicly traded company with an enormous market capitalization and a global presence changed its name and said, this is what we are doing now, a lot of other companies followed suit, but there's nothing there yet. And so conceptually, it's interesting to think that in the future, we will wear the types of devices that give us a visceral sensation of being in an embodied internet in the metaverse. A lot of times people talk about Roblox, which is a game that a lot of kids play as part of the metaverse. It's not. It's a gaming system. So I think we have a problem right now, which is, everybody, lots of hype and then a lot of FOMO, fear of missing out, and a lot of money spent. And now it's 2023. And I think a lot of companies are like, we made this investment, where's the metaverse? As with every technology, it's the infrastructure, which is super boring, and nobody it's very boring, but that's the stuff that matters. So if it was me, I would be paying more attention to the infrastructure being developed that will eventually support the metaverse versus metaversal applications and things like that.
A couple of days ago, I was watching somebody to say something really interesting. And you talk about gaming. We are talking about metaverse. And this person was saying that the difference between gaming and a metaverse is that the metaverse never stops, right? It's a different reality that runs all the time. That will compete with the reality that we see today. And we are talking about children here. How can we raise children in two different realities all the time? What's the confusion in everybody's head that can be happening in, 5 to 10 years from now?
Well, real life, I guess, technically has a beginning, middle, and end, because you're born, you live, and you die. It's so interesting what you just said about the metaverse and sort of infinite gameplay, right? It doesn't end. So there's an interesting point there. The moment that you enter the metaverse, I guess you're born, and then the versions of you live in the metaverse. When you die in the real world, what happens to that information? So does that also die? Does it continue to live on? And I think we're already starting to get answers to that. There's a couple of companies that are making generative AI systems that use you as the corpus. So they're trained on you, and they will replicate the type, it's like a chatbot, but they'll replicate the answers and the motions and the things that you might do, so that if you pass away, your loved one can continue to interact with you. It's interesting to think about a potential clone, like, oh my God, if I had a clone for myself, do you know how much I could get done at work? It would be amazing. But as far as kids are concerned, I think this is a really weird time to grow up. If you are in a privileged family that has enough money to provide you with technology and games and things like that, everything is on demand. You can set up your game so that your character never dies. In a lot of these games, you have to pay real money to keep playing, but it's not like the kids see real money. It's invisible to them, right? They're not getting $1 and physically giving somebody else $1. It's just happening on a credit card. So I think that there is some amount of detachment from the real world that is already started. And it'll be interesting to see how that plays out over time. Probably in ways that we're not imagining right now, would be my guess.
Well, you used the word weird, right? And I want to enter in this new field here, synthetic biology. And let me say here, I still think you are a sexy futurist, but this topic makes me real afraid. It's really, really, really different. In your latest book, I guess, the Genesis Machine, you describe this world where we could have, multi-parent mother or family. And I'm trying to correlate those things with the very conservative societies that we are still living with. It seems to me that it's kind of a time bomb, right? It's like these things are going to shock, to block sometime. How do you see this all new technology, all these new possibilities facing this old world? People trying to deny that. Is there a way to pause this evolution, or to make this mix maybe better? How do you see this happening?
Right. So let's maybe take a step back, because if people are not familiar with synthetic biology or bioengineering, they may be saying, what the hell is he talking about? Okay. So basically, bioengineering combines biology with engineering and a couple of other disciplines like computer science, artificial intelligence, even classic design. And the idea is to engineer or re-engineer life, to design it or redesign it to have new and improved purposes. So within the umbrella of bioengineering are tools and technologies like CRISPR, which is that system that you can use to edit genes, and also synthetic biology, which is where researchers design code on computers. I mean, biological code is really just ACTG. Computer code is 1 and 0. Biology is that, but letters and 2 more, so ACTG. And in the right combinations, you can, redesign or design new things. So there are some researchers that have already designed a minimum viable genome. It's a living organism, and its parents were not other organisms. Its parents were computers. Okay? So why would we do this? It's a good question.
Yes, exactly.
And a lot of people get very upset that, we are going against God and we shouldn't be changing life. Why should we do that? And I think that there are some good reasons for us to think about it. We have some serious climate change issues. You are well aware of that in the global south and in Brazil in particular. So here's something to think about. Brazil has a lot of abandoned mines. Mines are dark places. You can't live in them. It's just kind of like a space you can't really use. Well, what if sugarcane which is grown in Brazil, and it's like hard to grow and it's hard to harvest and it, requires all this stuff. What if we could re-engineer it so that it could be grown in a mine? And maybe you could get fiber optic lights to get light down into the mine. And now you're able to grow something in a way that's better for the environment, that makes use of a space that you've already got. I think of coffee. Brazilian coffee is magnificent. And it's going to be hard for you to grow in the years to come, because coffee, especially Brazilian coffee, requires very specific types of weather and humidity. So again, is there a way for us to engineer that coffee plant so that it can adapt and grow given the climate change? And people who are climate change activists get very mad at me when I say this, because to them, this is like giving everybody an excuse to keep cutting down the rainforest or to keep polluting or whatever. It's not an excuse to keep doing that. I mean, we should also figure out ways to stop, but there are huge macroeconomic forces. So, it's impossible to just stop doing those things overnight. It would devastate many economies. So this is another way to mitigate. There's some other really interesting things. You guys eat a lot of meat in Brazil, like a lot.
Yes. Maybe less than Argentina, but yes.
Less than Argentina, but a lot. Okay.
A lot.
So if population trends continue, you're going to need more meat. And it's harder and harder. Again, like there are variables outside of your control that have to do with, again, climate change and availability and all these things. If you take from a biopsy a tiny bit of meat from muscle tissue, let's say from a cow or a pig, you can grow that in a factory and it will turn into edible meat. And it will be the exact same molecular structure as the meat that would have come from the chicken or the cow or whatever. But it requires very few resources that you can control for it. You don't need antibiotics. So again, farmers get really mad when I talk about this. But the reality is someday this is going to be a much better way to produce protein that we all want to eat. And you can already do this today. So there's all these different applications once we start thinking about biology as being programmable. Now, to your original question about multi-parent children. So yeah, that's also possible. Right now, in Japan, scientists started with some skin cells from one person and created a sperm and an egg. And they were, not from a person, it was from a mouse. But they were successfully able to create something called an induced pluripotent stem cell, which is basically a special type of stem cell that you could turn into anything. So you could turn it into a kidney. If you need a kidney transplant, imagine growing your own kidney and not having to wait for an organ donor. But yeah, at some point, this will be a way, probably an alternative to create a new child. Let's say I'm a single person. This means you don't have to get a donor egg or donor sperm. It's also possible, like, I don't know, this sounds crazy, but let's say that there's two people who are very nice, they're very smart, but they're not what we would call classically attractive. What if they could get Rodrigo Santorino? Do you know who he is?
Yeah, famous guy here.
Oh my God, that guy is beautiful. Let's say you just got a little bit of him mixed in, and now you've got a child who's brilliant and lovely and also really attractive because of those Brazilian genes, right? And so he's gorgeous. So there's all kinds of possibilities. Now, this also means that all of this technology can be used for terrible purposes. Yes. The last thing that we want is a country or a cult. Let's say somebody starts a cult and tries to create superhumans by experimenting with genetic engineering. We don't want that. Let's say a country or a company or somebody tries to introduce a new strain of sugarcane, and let's say it grows really well in an abandoned mine, but it turns into a weed or something out in the real world and it winds up killing the rest of the sugarcane crop. There's all kinds of possibilities here. My point is that this is inevitable. So this technology already exists. It's already being used. And so it's a little bit farther off in the future than AI, but we need to start talking about it right now because we have to thoughtfully regulate it. And we have to think through the negative, like the potential catastrophic next order outcomes of this. And we have to make sure that it gets used so that everybody prospers.
I was thinking here one thing, and you're talking about the inevitability of those things. And okay, these things are going to happen, but how do we prevent somebody that has an evil mind and playing with Legos and he wants to combine, I don't know, Michael Phelps with Usain Bolt, Michael Jordan, and Pelé?
Yeah.
How do we prevent this type of arrangement?
Yeah, I mean, listen, right now it's being prevented because this is very hard to do. So it's hard to select for specific genes that you want to add. It's possible to select genes that you want to change or take away. So one amazing thing that's happened is that scientists have figured out how to isolate sickle cell anemia, which is a terrible disease that impacts a lot of people, and to basically edit that out. So the good news is that most of the work is how do we take away the negative versus how do we enhance? So that's not happening yet, but it's going to happen at some point. It's, so how do we prevent that? I think we have really strict controls and regulations and audits and just, we've got to be we have to sort of make a decision that this is not, that maybe that's not what we want. Now, maybe we do want some enhancements. So again, I go back to climate change for a moment. Let's say that we're just not going to stop the world from heating up. And let's say what that means is 100 years from now, there'll be really strong winds. It'll be it'll be 130 degrees, things like that. If we're going to continue to live on the planet, maybe one thing we do is change our skin so that we can be outside and, for a future human, 130 degrees is okay, And to that end, if we're going to live off of this planet, we're probably going to need to change our genetic composition anyways in order to be able to survive in other places. All of this stuff, by the way, is super speculative. I don't know what's going to happen. What I can tell you is that the tools exist today in rudimentary form. So this is the right time for us all to say, okay, anything is possible. Let's make sure that we are planning a future where the good stuff happens, not the bad stuff.
I think it's very good to talk about preservation, your point of view about preservation, but I'd like to ask you, how do you see the future of countries that doesn't have access of the technology? I think the distance to the country that has this technology will be the longest, isn't it?
Yeah. So that's a great question. And I think a lot about Brazil. Brazil should have ubiquitous, accessible 5G. It just should. And not just in Sao Paulo, it should be in the far western regions. It should be in the south. It needs to be everywhere. 20 years ago, there was a saying, I'm going to say it wrong in Portuguese. Let me say it in English. Brazil is the future.
Yep,
right?
yep, yep.
Do you remember that saying?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So that was a famous phrase, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think. Okay. And then I think a lot of people today feel like it's almost like a joke, right?
Exactly.
Right. So, but here's the thing, I've been to Brazil. There's amazing things happening in Brazil. There's a huge startup community. There's there's a lot. There's some of the most important banks in the planet are in Brazil. I think the issue is that the technology is not distributed very evenly. And so infrastructure matters, like all of these, like Brazil can and should become a global hub for synthetic biology. I think Brazil could reinvent agriculture, change the global south, influence what happens around the rest of the world. Brazil does not have the same geopolitical problems that the United States does and China does, right? Brazil's much more neutral. So Brazil could totally play a leadership role and be the future. But the government, whether, it was Bolsonaro, now it's Lula, I don't care who's the next president, they have to invest in infrastructure. And it has to be without corruption. There needs to be ubiquitous infrastructure and 5G at a minimum, right? And make it easier for people to engage digitally, which, so I think there's some work that's going to have to be done. I worry that the communities that aren't as connected are going, we're talking about these exponential technologies, AI, generative AI, Web3, synthetic biology, all of these things require connectivity and the cloud. Mm-hmm. And so the longer that everybody waits, the further behind these countries get. And I worry about that.
I love to hear that, of course, being here. It still sounds like, not a speculation, but a kind of a dream where we could do that. Because there are a lot of, in South America, you have Brazil, you have Argentina, you have Chile. Most of our countries, they do have economy based still on agriculture, meat, minerals. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about those things like harvesting meal inside the small machine that I put amino acids into it, and the other side gets a steak, it can really destroy the whole economy, right, of the country. But as you said, we're still in the beginning phase. There is a lot of things that should be done. But mm-hmm. I always see, independently of being in Brazil or any other place in the world, governments are slow. They don't act, they just react.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess I was just in Davos, Switzerland at the World Economic Forum, and the Ministry of Finance, Fernando Haddad, was there, and I had a chance to talk with him a little bit. I think that he had some bold ideas about the future economy for Brazil. But ultimately, you've got to get people to cooperate. And you guys have, just like the United States, you went through a huge swing. You went from Bolsonaro on the very far right to Lula on the very far left. We just had the same thing happen, right? We went from Trump on the very far right to Biden, who's he's not as far left as Lula, but he's more left. And I think the problem for people who are government workers is that they're like, what the hell do you want us to, pick a lane, pick a side. When you have these huge swings backwards and forwards, it creates policy uncertainty. It creates challenges for the business community. I think everybody comes into office and they're like, okay, we're going to change everything. We're going to go fast. But then you've still got everybody that has to cooperate with you. So again, I think both for, if I were to give one big piece of advice to Lula's administration, long-term planning. What is your go 20 years into the future and imagine the best possible Brazil. What's it going to take to get there? And it's probably not going to be a super, super far left political plan. It's going to have to be something where there's compromise. And then whoever gets elected next is going to have to still work on that plan. We have the same problem in the US, there is no long-term plan. So the long-term ideas about the future, I think, have to be, again, we have to take away politics, and everybody has to be willing to invest in this longer-term idea about the future and execute on that plan, which is a hard thing to do. Yeah. But like I said, I met up with some of the folks from the current government, and I was we'll see what happens. I was very, very interested in what Fernando Haddad had to say. So we'll see what happens.
I would like to make some quick questions, just
Sure.
to relax a little bit.
If you had another profession, what would that be?
Oh, I was going to say, if I could have another profession and automatically be amazing at it, I think I would want to be a drummer. But if I had another profession and maybe a teacher full time, maybe.
Teacher. Good.
Yeah.
Very good.
And who would you love to invite for a coffee? He can be alive or dead. I don't know. Doesn't matter.
That list, I've got a very long list for that.
Maybe top 2
there's
or
a guy
top 3.
Top 2 or 3. So there's a person named Herman Kahn who in the 1940s and 50s is kind of gave birth to foresight the way that I do it now. I would love to go back in time. He was like a strange guy. So I think I'd love to have coffee with both him and another guy named Pierre Vac, who in the 1970s and 80s took foresight and brought it into the corporate world where it was very successful at Royal Dutch Shell. Both of them were gone by the time that I was, old enough to talk to them, but I think it'd be awesome to go have a coffee with the two of them.
What brings you motivation to work every day?
It's funny, you asked me that question. I'm in my office in my house, and there's a big whiteboard. I painted my wall with a special kind of paint so you can write on it with erasable markers. And I have a saying that I look at every day, and it says, discipline is greater than motivation. In math, that you have the greater than sign. So it says discipline is greater than motivation. So the way I would answer your question is, it doesn't matter if I'm motivated or not. I have a job to do. And the future is not going to show up great without work. So it's discipline that drives me in just about everything that I do. Whether or not I'm motivated doesn't really matter.
And the last question is, we are talking about all these new technologies and so for the comfort of the people that are watching us, what would be this world of dream and which technology would be part of this new world? It's so good to live in.
Connected glasses. So imagine the glasses that, if you're watching us, that you can see on me. And if you're not watching and you're listening, they're just a normal pair of glasses. But a pair of glasses that gives me a heads-up display. So tells me where to go, gives me information, helps me know how many calories I'm going to eat before I eat them. Basically, this layer of information that helps me make better decisions throughout my day, helps calm me down. Can you imagine feeling anxious and your glasses know that you're feeling anxious and gives you a little hey, do you want to calm down? And it plays calming music and it blocks out whatever you're looking at and makes it like a beautiful, beach scene in Rio or something like that. That's what I want. And I actually think that is on the horizon. I don't know exactly when it will show up, but that's definitely on our horizon. I'm excited about that.
I have one more. Is that difficult to be mommy and a futurist?
Is it difficult? So it's interesting you asked. My daughter just came home from school and was waving to me over there, and I was kind of doing this hey, give me a second. So she's very smart. She's super interested in engineering and art. So I'm not sure where she's going to land when she grows up. But it's fun it's fun to have conversations with her. We were having dinner a couple of weeks ago talking about synthetic biology, and I said, would you eat a dog if we made food, we made a dog to eat, just the meat, right? It never had a face, but let's say it was a Cocker Spaniel. Would you eat that? And she was like, I would probably eat that because she doesn't like dogs. And I said, okay, what about a cat? She loves cats. Would you eat a cat? And she was like, I don't know, if I was starving and there wasn't any other option. And then she said, Mom, what if we cloned a person? What if we made human meat? Would you eat that? Because I had said, I don't normally eat a lot of meat, but I'll eat, whatever. I'll eat any meat there is if it didn't come from an animal. And she said, what about if it came from humans? And then that started off this crazy long conversation that my husband, my daughter, and I had about, is it cannibalism if it came from how would you know? And it's fun to have the perspective of a kid who's old enough. She's 12, so she's old enough to have the conversation, but she's not jaded. Her brain, she's not immediately saying no. She's a kid. So it's great to have a kid in the house to have these conversations with. But she's almost a teenager, so there's that I have to deal with, which is not fun. So.
Good, very good.
Okay. Well, Emmy, thank you very, very much for your time. We love to have this conversation with you. It was great for us. And I really hope we surely could have another talk in, I don't know, maybe 1 year, a bit more.
Let's do it.
And
let's do it. We'll check in on our predictions.
Thank you very much.
Muito obrigada.
We finished the recording, but it's true. We'd love to talk with you in a couple of years, maybe presentially, so you can enjoy all the things. We can have I don't know, city tours with you all around, so you can meet better Brazil. Nice.
Thank you so much.
Então, muito obrigado a todos que estiveram conosco até o final do episódio. Espero que, assim como eu, vocês tenham gostado dessa conversa com a Amy hoje. Para quem gostou, ela tem uma série de livros que vocês podem buscar na sua livraria preferida ou online. E também tem um report que ela entrega todo ano, que está no futuretodayinstitute.com, www.futuretodayinstitute.com, e você pode baixar essa informação gratuitamente aí na sua casa e ter realmente isso na tua mão, de tudo aquilo que ela acha que vão ser as novas tecnologias mais promissoras aí nos próximos anos. Siga a gente aí nas redes sociais, Expresso Talks BR. Um abraço. A câmera é lenta?